George Bush gave us a lot of really great advice when it came to our lives. In fact, I have one perfect example for you. Take a look.
Let me look. The key for me is to keep expectations low.
A lot of people made fun of him for that quote, but it turns out that some researchers actually agree with him. These are researchers at the University College London, and they're trying to understand exactly how the brain works. These are neuroscientists, and what it is that makes us happy. And what they found is that it is extremely important to not have very high expectations, which I don't agree with, but let me give you a little more. The researchers say the following: your happiness increases only if you do better than you expected. So what they did is they looked at what certain expectations people had, and then they gave them rewards, right? And if the rewards were less than what they expected to get, they would be deeply disappointed. If they had lower expectations, they'd be ecstatic about the reward, right? Which I think is an interesting way of looking at things, but I also think it's extremely dangerous to tell people don't have high expectations, because I do believe that you get what you expect you're going to get.
So all those things are true, and look at what happened when we had low expectations with Bush. 8-year disaster,
yes.
Right? So sometimes that's not the right way to go, but it is for him, because he's right. Everybody assumed that he was a total moron. So any time that he didn't bumble his words and didn't make a mess of things, they'd be like, no, Bush is like, no, he might have 2 to 3 brain cells.
Yes.
Not bad for Bush, right? And it was an ingenious, in some ways, magic trick, right? And it's true in life too. If you have high expectations for a movie and it doesn't match those expectations, you get a little disappointed. If you have low expectations and it's a mediocre movie, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
That wasn't so bad. Everybody knows that phenomenon.
Yes.
And so one interesting thing we learned from this is it doesn't really matter how much money you get paid. It matters how much money you get paid more than you expected, or less than you expected.
Which is why 100% of college graduates are really upset and unhappy, because when they're in college and when they're in high school, they're told all you need is a college degree and you're going to be super freaking wealthy. And then you graduate and you make, if you're lucky, $20,000 a year.
So that's a great point, and I hadn't thought of it that way before. But also with Americans, you have to remember, every American believes in their heart of hearts that they're going to be a millionaire. Right? Now, of course, it's not true, right? But they've got sold American dream, and I think it's possible, but it's not probable. And everybody thinks like, oh, that's gonna be me. And so when you get to the point where you realize, it turns out I'm not gonna be a millionaire, then you're really disappointed.
There's a few months of absolute depression that you feel after you graduate college. And I know that it wasn't just me. I mean, look, this is anecdotal evidence because it's based on people that I know in my circle of friends. But after you graduate college and you enter the job market and you realize, A, how difficult it is to find a job in the field that you're actually educated in, and B, when you do find the job that you want, how little you make, it's just the saddest thing in the world. I mean, the expectations that we give people in college is ridiculous. We need to keep it real with them. The best professor I had wrote what the salaries are for journalists. And she's like, you guys will be lucky if you work for the top publication and make $40,000 a year.
Right.
And then she's like, if you're uncomfortable with that, leave this room. And the next time we met for class, half the class was gone.
Oh, that's devastating
Yes.
/ awesome.
She's now the chair of the department, one of the best professors I've ever had.
And you know what? Half the department is left. Okay, so now more on this. But the good news is, don't worry if you're pissed, so are the rich, because their expectation was extreme wealth.
Yep.
So since the bar is so high for them, they don't realize how good they have it.
Exactly.
Now, it's not really a thing to be happy about. I wish that they would enjoy their money. In fact, I think they have an obligation to enjoy their money to make it for all the ones of us who don't have it, right? So but they don't because their expectation is this high. So if they lose a little bit of money, but they're still incredibly rich, they feel terrible about it,
Yep.
right? So now, and then finally to Anna's point, they're right about how happy you feel or not based on expectations. On the other hand, if you have low expectations for yourself, the highest you can go is those low expectations.
Yes.
The higher you set the expectations, the higher you can go.
Yeah, so I think that you have to have a combination of things to succeed. First of all, you should have high expectations and you should have absolutely no fear of failure, right? So if you do fail, you're not absolutely depressed and horrified by it. You just kind of pick yourself back up and say, all right, I'm going to try again, or I'm going to go in a different direction. I think that's really the key to happiness, not being afraid and knowing that there is some likelihood that you will fail. And I don't like the idea of limiting yourself. If you think that you can't do something, then you're not going to be able to do it. If you fear something, you've already made failure an option.
Yeah, I used to tutor this kid when I was in law school. And I said, so what do you want to be? And he said, a truck driver. That's it, right? And look, nothing wrong with being a truck driver, bless his heart. But when you're a young kid, you know, you're hoping that he reaches a little further, you know. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I wanted him to be something, you know, a little grander. But so is that kid ever going to become an astronaut, a president, whatever you think is successful? And maybe, again, maybe I'm wrong about whatever I think is quote unquote successful, right? No, because the highest he thinks you can go is truck driver. So I think that's just super important about life. And I think Anna's right about the other point that she made, which is you got to put your ego aside. The problem with people, especially if they're insecure, is they're trying to protect their ego at all costs. So I'm never going to show the world that I'm a failure. I'm never going to fail. I'm never going to fail. Ironically, going to lead to failure. So it's okay to fail. If you're not ready to fall, then you never know how far you can go. And so you got to be able to get to the point where you've gone a little too far to know where your limit is, right? And then pick yourself back up and then go for it again.
Yeah. In fact, if there's something that you fear and it's related to your career, you should probably do it. That's the only way you're going to progress. If you just do things that make you comfortable, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to stay in the same place.
And honestly, that's all we've ever done at the Young Turks is that we have succeeded through failure. We've tried everything you could possibly imagine and got rid of all the things that don't work. And a lot of people wouldn't have done that because they're like, oh, we are the esteemed, whatever they are, XYZ, NBC. And well, no, the executive's reputation is on the line. We can't take that kind of risk. Here, we do nothing but risk because we want to see what works. We want to see what you guys like, right? And we're not afraid to fail on many, many occasions until you get to the right formula. And you know what? You know what you're looking at right here? The right formula.